Welcome, everybody. It is 4 o'clock. It is Business Monday here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I am Josh Fenton, CEO of GoLocal. Next to me is Cha-Ching, the money man, Gary Sass, fresh off of some exotic something during 4th of July weekend involved with yachts and helicopters and things like that. Things that the super rich do, the rest of us read about and watch on television. Mr. Moneyman, we had a fun story broke yesterday. Rhode Island, under then General Treasurer Gina Raimondo, invested in lots of hedge funds. One of them was Elliott Management, managed by Paul Singer, one of the richest men in the world.
Well, I think he's about the 327th richest man in the world.
He's actually 822 on Forbes' list. He's 822. He's worth $2.9 billion. He is a very aggressive hedge fund manager, and he had a hedge on a Chinese loan to the famous soccer club, AC Milan. I believe David Beckham played for that club, and Messi might have played for that club once upon a time. And the Chinese bank defaulted on the monies from Mr. Singer's Elliott Management Group, and now owns a premier soccer team. And thus, the retirees of the state of Rhode Island now have an interest in an Italian soccer club. Is that what we're supposed to be doing with our retirees?
It depends. If we give our retirees a trip to Italy, to stop at Milan, see the soccer game, go down the coast, go to Florence and Rome, then that would be a form of retirement benefit. But it's a much, we joke about that, but it's really kind of comical in a serious way. When Governor Raimondo was General Treasurer, she diverted about $1 billion of the pension assets into I think it was 14 different hedge funds. And the idea was to hedge against changes in the market on the upside, where more traditional money managers, particularly of public pension funds, would look at index funds, lower yield, but much safer, hedge or protect against volatility, protect against inflation, have a better record, frankly, than hedge funds. Hedge funds, you pay large fees up front, whether they produce a penny or not in many cases. And so it was a calculated gamble. The gamble did not work out, as witnessed not by what I say, but what the new General Treasurer said. He basically came in and said, after reviewing the state's pension portfolio, it was time to get back to the basics. He recommended, I forget the exact number, but about $600 million that were invested in hedge funds be sold, be converted back into more traditional, more secure, less costly investments. The hedge funds proved to be a gamble that did not succeed. There were some that made money, there were some that lost money, but on the whole it was a risky proposition, and I'm glad to see we're getting out of the hedge fund business. We never should have been in the hedge fund business to begin with. The other thing about hedge funds, this is more of a political observation than an economic observation, a lot of the very big hedge funds have all kinds of political tentacles that go to places that you don't even know about. Just for example, Paul Singer, who I have some experience with since he was a major supporter of Marco Rubio, a major funder for Marco Rubio, is on the board of the Manhattan Institute.
Right.
Manhattan Institute is an organization that I depend upon. It's conservative, but it's a very, work is well done, conservative think tank. Through that think tank relationship, you develop relationships with people in public life. You can give them awards that the Institute gives out if you think it's...
Gina Raimondo won one of those awards.
Well, no, if that's appropriate. And so you got all, as they would say in before World War I started, all these entangling alliances when you get to the hedge fund business. And in government, it is so important to try to be transparent and accountable about those alliances, that when you get involved with most hedge funds, you're getting into an area, frankly, where government is the younger child in that discussion.
Well, Paul Singer is a big player in a lot of different games. He was the 7th largest political donor in the 2016 cycle, giving $26 million to leading Republican efforts, was the funder through a series of different entities of the so-called Trump dossier, which some link to being the impetus for the Mueller investigation. So he's got his hands, and then he turned around once Trump got elected and gave Trump's inaugural committee $1 million to help fund the Trump inauguration. So this is about as wily a complex. The one we'll be reporting on tomorrow, it's been reported on before, but not in the context of Rhode Island, is he once, in a 15-year effort to secure some money that the government of Argentina owed him, was able to take control of the Argentine government-owned tall ship and seized it, including its entire crew. So he's a creative, industrious man, and it seems a little bizarre that that's where we're putting our retirees' funds. This is a story that's not going to go away, and I think there's a lot more to come out of it.
Right. You know, the story is that why did we put $1 billion into hedge funds, period? You know, I understand the technical reasons that we wanted to hedge against downturns in the market, and this was an upside, so it would help us
But
better.
we were one of the highest percentage of states to invest in hedge funds. I think we got as high as 18%. It was in the top 3 or 4.
It was 18, but it was about 14, 15%, my memory, but you might be right.
And clearly, fellow Democratic General Treasurer Seth Magaziner thought better of it, and within a fairly short period of time, move funds out of it. Cal's pension fund, the state of California's retirees pension fund, has, I think, totally left hedge funds. I guess hedge funds become right sooner or later because there's a downturn at some point, but you lose a lot of upside investing in hedge funds, and can you ever get back what the fees cost structure is?
No, it's a, I think it's clear that investing the amount that we did in hedge funds was not fiscally prudent. Now, you might have bought 1 or 2 hedge funds. There's nothing, bad about hedge funds per se, but if you look at the hedge funds that we bought, you look at the fees that we were paid, we dove into the swimming pool head first, and there was no water in the swimming pool.
Right.
And so don't give all hedge funds a bad name. You want to diversify portfolios, but you want to do it with reason and balance. And of a portfolio at that time that was probably about $7.5 billion, we took 14% of it. We took $1 billion and put it into these hedge funds with fees that were unnecessary, where if we had kept the money in indexed funds with very low risk, not as good a return, we've probably done almost as well, if not better.
How does this set the stage for, we saw a chaotic week for Democrats last week with these somewhat crazy endorsements. I mean, no matter what your ideology is or things like that, endorsing John Carnevale and Gregory Acciardo and, I don't know what kind of Democrat wants to endorse a Trump supporter over an incumbent female Democrat, but it was as chaotic a week. You know what, it reminded me of the week in which John Holmes failed to file his papers.
Oh,
and Ron Makeley ended up getting the nomination, sort of default, and ended up winning a congressional seat. It was just bedlam.
But I have 2 observations on that. One is not as bad as other people's. If you believe, like I do, and very few people I think believe this today, that you want both political parties to be a big tent, then there's no reason why the Democrat Party can't give an endorsement to a business type that has moderate to conservative views about government, and there's no reason, as we Republicans used to do in the past, to give an endorsement to a John Chafee who has a more moderate and in some cases more liberal views. So, and that
So,
happens.
and where does John Carnivale fit into
Well,
that? Is that the biggest tent?
That's my big. That's a striped tent. But I'm coming. That was my second point. So when people right away get politically exercised because everybody that is supported by the party doesn't meet their litmus test, I say, well, that's kind of funny. If you want to draw more voters in, you want a big tent party. So I dismiss a little bit of that is just identity politics, extremism on both the right and left. I don't think extremism is really healthy for the system. The second point I want to make, which deals more directly with Carnivale, I don't know what role the speaker played, but the folklore, and it's probably more than folklore around here for a long time, is that the speaker controlled that process.
Yeah.
And I think the reforms need to be considered within I'll stick with the Democratic Party here, on where the leadership comes, how the endorsement process is, how open and transparent the endorsement process is. I'm less concerned about the outcome than the process that was used. And I think it's probably time that we move away, that the speaker has an unbelievable power when the speaker, which has always been the case in all our memories, is from the majority party and it can completely control the majority party, that gives additional power to the legislative branch versus the executive branch. It makes it easy for the speaker to maintain discipline in his caucus. It makes it harder for reformers to get a vote on line item veto. It took generations to get a vote on separation of powers. And so I think that's really the story here, is who should chair the political party, how open the endorsement process should be, and the third point, which a lot of the political correcties won't agree with me on, it ought to be as open as possible to encourage broad types of participation in both parties.
Well, listen, I don't think there's any doubt about it. I was, first and foremost, I think there's always a line in the sand, and it seems like the Carnivale and Gregochardo endorsements, one on the Senate side and one on the House side, were call it a new low. But simultaneously, it was an opportunity for the governor to speak out about it. And by the way, nothing stops Alan Fung or Patricia Morgan about talking about the absurdity of a John Carnivale who's now under charges, 3, I think, felony charges. Perjury and forced out of office just a year and a half ago. That this is out of bounds. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. This is, if we're going to have a modern Rhode Island, we're not going to re-elect. We're not going to bring back John Carnivale's of the world.
Well, as you said, a very interesting thing, because in a lot of places, the governor of whatever party the governor is from is in a lot of ways the titular head of the party, and it brings back into a sharper contrast the really executive-legislative relationship, which I'm most, from a government perspective, I'm most interested in, that there be strong executive, and that if you can make the executive stronger, somebody has to sacrifice, because you can just get 100 pounds in a 100-pound bag.
Yeah.
It'll probably come at the expense of some legislative prerogatives.
So definitely an interesting time. Matt Brown had a big week, seemed to get a lot of oxygen, clearly defined himself as a reform-minded progressive, spoke out consistently. Can he make a move in the Democratic primary? Can he move successfully to the left of her and get enough momentum to make this a horse race?
I can't handicap a Democratic primary, but I look at the support that the governor has and the way she's melded together various Democratic constituent groups. So, she has the women's group, she has organized labor, she has groups that normally were progressive. There are a lot of progressives up there that scream they're progressives in both the speaker's line.
Yeah.
And so, she, has done a good job in, bringing the various interests in the Democratic Party under her banner. And I think, Matt will have a tough time. I don't see it quite as analogous as some people do, is that this is a Sanders versus Hillary thing. We're talking about local politics here. We're talking about it. Hillary had no incumbent powers in the state of Rhode Island. When the governor runs for office, whether the governor is successful or unsuccessful, he or she, brings a little clout with him because of the powers of incumbency. So I think Matt has a very difficult road to hoe.
I'll beg to differ just a tad.
Please do.
Obviously not from the standpoint of the office, but Hillary Clinton beat Barack Obama in 2008 by about 10 or 15 points. The Clintons were the darlings of Rhode Island for 10 or 15, 20 years in electoral politics here. They did have some level of stature and momentum. They were, I think there were only 2 elected officials that supported publicly Hillary Clinton. One was Aaron Ruggenberg, and one was Sheehan.
They supported, you mean Bernie or Hillary?
Sanders, excuse me, in the Democratic primary. The Speaker, the congressional delegation, the mayor, the governor were all for Hillary Clinton. The Clintons came in here numerous times. I think Hillary Clinton came in once. Bill Clinton came in 2 or 3 times. But they didn't anticipate that there is a bigger schism in the Democratic Party in this state than maybe anticipated.
Well, I think there's definitely a schism. The nomination battles demonstrated that. But at the same time, there are organized interest groups that have a direct stake, which are not quite the same. Planned Parenthood, nationally can support candidate A or candidate B. That has less impact on the local, that the local chapter of that organization supporting candidate A, and using its phones and its foot soldiers and its donations on the ground. So I think the dynamic is a little bit different. But you're right. One of the great uncertainty about this election, both parties in the primary, and I think also in the general election, will be who comes out to vote. And if a lot of people who come out to vote who were part of the resistance to Trump, that could help map. But I just see their organizations in the state not, being turned on. I see individuals being turned on, and I think politics is a team game, so it seems the teams are lining up in all places.
The Republicans had to enjoy the week. They weren't talking about Rentgate or some crazy Trump thing. Did this give a week of opportunity for Cranston Mayor Alan Fung or House Minority Leader Patricia Morgan to regain some footing and jumpstart their campaigns post the 4th of July week?
Well, I won't say they lost footing, because I don't know what they have to regain. At this point, there was nothing exciting or new that came from those campaigns. The most exciting thing was the independent candidate, former Republican Trillo's boat hitting a rock, winning a short.
Yeah, right. It was a rocky week. It was a rocky week for Joe Trillo.
But he's going to laugh all the way to the bank because he got some more free publicity.
Absolutely.
His name out there. I didn't see any game changer last week on either side.
Let's jump over. Money Magazine did an analysis of the fastest growing jobs in each state. And in Rhode Island, the fastest growing job is a manufacturing position and pays about $35,000 a year. In contrast, Massachusetts' fastest growing job was a statistician paying almost $100,000 a year. And in Connecticut, which we seem to celebrate their lackluster economy, their fastest growing job was aerospace engineer at about $113,000 a year. You've talked about this issue quite a bit. It seemed to reaffirm really the narrative that you've raised as a concern about Rhode Island's economy, that we may be creating some jobs in this economy. We're not creating the kinds of jobs that are going to create long-term impact, long-term wealth, and redefine Rhode Island's economy.
We're not dealing with our fundamental and structural issues. We are growing jobs. The current employment situation in the state is solid. When you have 4.1% unemployment, that's solid. So you should look askance at the solid job performance. At the same time, you have to look at some other things. Your first point is compared to what? The economy is doing better. The Trump tax cuts before that, the Obama years had modest growth. And so all states came out of the recession growing jobs.
Right.
And we were one of those states. So the way I measure it is, well, how are we doing compared to other people? Well, I've just over the last 5-year period, I try to jump over political terms, so I had a little more balance. From January of 2013, we've grown. Our job market has grown by 6.2%. Not shabby. The United States has grown by 9.6%. Looks a little shabbier. Massachusetts has grown by 1%. So while we've had solid growth, we haven't had as much growth. Then the second question is not just the quantity, but the quality of jobs, and we have some real, structural, problems. Education, declining population growth of 0.1% a year, and the future projections are not rosy. If you look at the state's own 5-year forecast through 2022, over the next 5 years, they project that our jobs will grow about less than 0.5% a year, about 0.4% a year. Our labor force will grow by just about 0.1% a year. And so those are real problems of stagnation. The other problem is the quality. So these are factors that we're not addressing. We could talk about what we're doing. We're doing some positive things, but these real problems are not being addressed. And then you got the mixed job question. So the figures that you cite were the average type of job in Massachusetts, which was a statistician, paid almost $100,000, and our job was somebody that worked in molding fiberglass. That paid about $35,000. Keep in mind, for a family of 4 to meet a reasonable, not even reasonable, but the minimum cost of living standard in Rhode Island, you need an income about $55,000. So when a job pays $35,000, that tells you about two income families. Okay, but so why does something like that happen? Because we have created some good jobs in the business and the professional sector, which pay on average about, the ones we've created since the recession, about $67,000. That's good. But at the same time, the second fastest growing sector is accommodations and food. And those jobs average paying $21,000 a year. And then you look at what we've lost in information technology, we're not growing as quick. We've lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs since the recession. So you see yourself losing a lot of jobs that paid in the 50 to 60,000 range, which you needed to maintain a family of 4, and we are substituting some good jobs, but not as many as other states, and we're substituting a lot more low-paying jobs. Well, that gets back to dealing with some of the structural issues that I mentioned. And so while it's nice to give all these tax incentives and tax credits out, and I have to admit that tax incentives and tax credits are used by most states. They're really a core of any kind of economic development strategy. There are certain issues that jump out where we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and I don't feel we have the right answers on accountability and the transparency of the tax, what they're being used to pay for.
Gosh, you saw a protest last week by labor folks on, a job that's got a lot of questions to it and no oversight.
And let me give you one example. I may be mistaken, so if I'm mistaken, people need to correct me. I think the Commerce Rhode Island claims that through their tax credit programs, they've generated about $650 million in investment, in real estate investment. You know how much they've generated in innovation investment? 1.7 million.
That's not so good.
And I won't even have to comment on that.
That's not so good.
But that's that in a nutshell. And those, I believe, are their figures. It's been a while since I looked at them. So are we investing in the right winners and losers? Well, the answer is mixed. Clearly, we're not investing in the right winners. If you look at job quality, are they sustainable and marketable? After we build the apartment house for rich people and hotels for people that can pay $250 or $300 a room a night, what kind of jobs sustain those kinds of activities? A porter, these are all out of work, and so there seems to be a disconnect between the level of investment we're making and not growing jobs, but the quality of jobs that we're growing.
Is there, Brown University came out with something about the economy today. Brookings came out with it 2 years ago. Before that, the governor had another one of these things, these prioritizations, and You know, the Brookings one, I swear to God, Ed Dupree delivered the same exact thing in about 1988. You probably wrote it with Roger Bejan. I think you and Roger Bejan.
No, that was the someone on text. Me and Marcel wrote the economic.
You and Marcel,
Yeah.
right. So, you know, at some point it's about execution. I mean, we can have all the plans in the world, but we've got to really make a commitment, and some of these commitments aren't so easy to really deliver good, significant changes in the economy. They're going to create some significant middle class.
Well,
and creating $35,000 manufacturing jobs is better than nothing, but it is not a way to create a sustainable, long-term growth economy.
Well, I think there are a couple of things. I think the key thing you mentioned, is leadership. You have to have leadership who is willing to make, decisions that don't have an immediate political payback. Because one of the big mistakes governors in all states make is they look at an economic development program and they want to say it did this much in the first
Right.
4 years. And my favorite poster child is the Research Triangle down in North Carolina.
Well, and Bob Whitcomb wrote about that this weekend, which is functionally an incentive-free zone, but built with a structure that was sustainable.
But it took 30 years
Yeah,
to get there. It
right.
didn't happen in the first four. And so there are things that you have to invest in. We have to really talk about education reform. We really got to talk about, I'll use this word to kind of clean up the community college and make it more than, than it is. I think they're trying there, but I don't think they've succeeded. We need to have the guts to invest, more in innovation and less in politically connected real estate deals. We have, and those are the kinds of things that if you do that, there's no guarantee of success. But it's when you talk about reprioritization, it's not a reprioritization of existing programs. It's a reprioritization of the culture of economic development in the state.
Well, Money Man, as always, huge insights. Congratulations on your friendship with the super rich there in the hedge fund industry.
The government has a lot closer relationships with them than I do.
This is an interesting story that's going to play out, this investment in Elliott Management, and we'll have another piece on it tomorrow. I appreciate you taking the time.
I wish we had invested in Manchester United. That's my team.
Right. Is that Glasser, the
yeah.
owner of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
AC Milan have difficulty with Manchester United.
It's interesting. AC Roma is owned by a venture capital guy out of Boston, one of the owners I think he's a Highland Capital guy. All the best Italian soccer teams, I guess, are now owned by venture and hedge funds in Rhode Island. We're going to take a break in 1 minute, and we'll be back with Saul Kaplan, Mr. Innovation. Money Man, thank you so much for coming on the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. It is Business Monday. I'm Josh Fenton. With me is Saul Kaplan, Mr. Innovation. That's the watchword of the day. Lots going on.
Air conditioning. I
Air
have two words.
Air conditioning. Cannot get it cool enough out here because there's so much hot innovation going out here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center, and maybe our friends at Deepwater could get the blades cooking a little bit better and cool it off a little bit. You know, a few months ago when the first Go store, the unmanned Amazon retail location came out, and it was sort of pitched at, oh, it's just a test. We're not really going to implement this, and oh, we're just going to see what it's like and analyze a few things. Well, silly consumer who seemed to love it. The Go model is now being expanded to a larger retail environment and a second store, which is much larger. Can we put the clock on the field now? In how long will it be before there is not a single human being working at a Whole Foods in America? Is it 36 months?
Well, you said the magic words. The consumer seems to like it. So, yeah, it was one of 100 experiments that they have going on at any point in time out at Amazon. And they use all these new technologies to try to improve the customer experience. So what's better than being able to walk into a store, take what you need off the shelves, walk out of the store, and not have to worry about checking out, right? And
Price check.
Yeah,
right.
Are you kidding
Paper
me?
or plastic?
Who wouldn't want that?
Right.
Like, as a consumer, who wouldn't want that? So, of course, consumers have been flocking to these test stores. And so, go figure. They're expanding them. They're going to add more. They're going to take a bigger footprint. And they're going to keep innovating. They're going to keep trying to improve the experience. And
I'm going 36 months.
36 months until it's all gone?
Yeah, 36 months. That's my prediction. 36 months from, I'll even go today.
No, I mean, I've said this before. I think that they're really good with lots of different models to serve different groups of customers. There'll be some customers that'll still want, to go in and talk to somebody about the fruit and vegetables.
And they'll say, go to Eastside Marketplace because at the Whole Foods on whatever that is, Angel or Waterman I guess it is, there's not going to be a human being in there because you're going to walk in with a special bag, you're going to fill it up, you're going to walk out, and you're going to be out of there in half the time. And
if that's what consumers want, but there'll be some consumers who won't even, like me, who I don't care if there's no cashier there.
Right.
I don't want to go in the first place.
Right.
So find another way to get me the things that I want and need, and get them where I need them.
But they've already crushed that, right? And they're already getting that bigger and faster with Prime and 2-hour delivery, I think, starts shortly in Boston.
Did you see the latest thing that they're doing? This is so smart, right? They're experimenting with every kind of last mile distribution model, including saying to folks, hey, apply to become a delivery person, like an Uber, for food delivery, and we'll register you, and you'll probably have an app, and it'll be just like Uber, where somebody will need something delivered, and you'll swing by and do it. And you'll pick up a few bucks on the side, and then you'll go back to doing the other stuff that you do.
I think in the Atlantic there's a first-person story about a woman who became a Prime deliverer for Amazon and did not paint the most complimentary picture of the corporate culture of
Amazon,
of being a delivery part of the infrastructure of the delivery structure of that company.
There'll be some of that too. There'll be some of that. But it is Amazon Prime Day. Listen to me like I'm a billboard. I'm a walking billboard. For Amazon. On your show today. But Amazon Prime Day is coming up.
Next Monday.
10 million Amazon Prime members, and I think
there's 100 million.
It's going to make 100 million.
100 million Prime.
By a factor of only 10.
100 million Prime.
100 million, a base of 100 million Amazon Prime members, and I think this is going to be bigger than Black Friday. Before the holidays coming up here.
Well, they're already sending. I'm a Prime member. I'm sure you are. Already sending coupons to be utilized for $10 off or $15 off, edging it up. I'm waiting. I'm expecting even more and more incentive before buying. But
you'll have to take the day off of work just to sit there so that you can participate
take advantage
in
of
the
all
stuff
the
that comes
opportunity.
popping out
Right.
on Amazon Prime Day.
And just if you don't know what it is, it's sort of, I don't know, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Golden Ticket Day. It's a whole bunch of things on wild discount. It's unpredictable. It's surprised by the moment. And, if you've got a Monday in the summer and it's raining out, it's probably the perfect day. We obviously, as a technology company, buying a lot of equipments and lots of, as affectionately say, lots of cheap pieces of plastic made in China that wire everything together. We spend thousands and thousands of dollars every year buying little things, and they're expensive.
So you'll be sitting there waiting for that modem that you need here at GoLocal.
Right. That other speaker, that other camera, that other stand, whatever it might be, accordingly.
No, we laugh about it, but this is what's happening to the shopping experience and retail, and it should be way more than obvious by now that you can't sit back and watch this.
No.
Right? You have got to play. You have got to be improving customer experience, serving different groups of customers, using these technologies. They didn't invent these technologies. They're just using them the same way anybody can use them. And so playing defense is not going to work. Building regulatory moats to try to prevent them from doing it, from serving us, the consumer,
right.
Who likes a better shopping experience, isn't going to work in the long run. And so the only thing that works is getting better faster, is innovating.
Let's talk, huge discussion in Rhode Island. Gary was just on talking about it, juxtaposing kind of the Rhode Island, and you have experience at all levels with this. The Rhode Island strategy right now is trying to create a good mousetrap incentive program to encourage Rhode Island businesses and encourage businesses from out of state to come in with a series of different rebuild and tax incentives for hiring and all these things. And Bob Whitcomb in his column this weekend pointed out sort of that old truism of Triangle Park down in North Carolina, in which and Gary appropriately said, listen, it's been a 30-year effort, but they are now living large.
Right.
You couldn't have a more successful area of the country economically. Right. They've built everything to some degree right. They've schools, they have infrastructure, but and they didn't do it overnight. They did it over 30 years
right.
of growth. They have colleges there, North Carolina and Duke. It's all kind of works together. Do we need to sort of stop and say, let's change, let's not try? It was a little bit of what Ling Chafee tried to say.
Right.
Let's not. We're only going to win in the short term. We'll win in the short term. We'll win in the short. Let's try and play for a longer term game.
Well, these are not mutually exclusive ideas. We can talk in principle about the use of incentives, which are taxpayer dollars,
right.
That go to specific companies in target industries,
sure.
in order to incent them to locate, to add employees here. I'm not one of these purists who says we shouldn't have any of those incentives, that we should just...
Ling Chafee was a purist.
No, some people will say
right.
just lower the overall tax rates and don't spend the money on individual incentives. The problem with that is that unless everyone else does that, unless they do that in Massachusetts or Connecticut or everywhere else, you're the one on principle, and everyone else has incentives to lure people on the margin and to lure investment on the margin. I'm for smart investment and smart incentives. And what do I mean by that? I think you should be incenting those organizations that have the potential to export products and service outside of the state, not those entities that are only selling to other Rhode Islanders, because in the end the market will support that. We don't, as taxpayers, need to incentivize that. What we do need to incent are companies to come here that create something here, not because they're just trying to sell it to Rhode Islanders, because we're too small, right? But because they're trying to export that. When CVS puts its headquarters here,
Right.
CVS Health, it's serving a network of 10,000 stores all over the country.
Right.
So those jobs are providing service outside
But they didn't
this.
put it here. They kind of grew out of two
that's right.
brothers who started Mark Stevens,
Correct.
and you know, and
Right.
Hasbro's kind of the same. You know, listen, Virgin Pulse might be
don't
the
know.
one, be
Right.
the one that kind of has a little homegrown. But then we used incentives, and it looks like it's all working together. But you know, how do you build an environment in which I'm a smart guy up in Cambridge at CIC, and I go, man, I need more breathing room. I need a little relief on paying $80 rent when I grow and, you know, do my B round, and I'm going to eat up all my capital with just these heavy costs. Where else could I go? And right now, we're not on that radar screen.
Oh, and Rhode Island could play to try to peel off at the margin, right? It's a zero-sum game.
Right.
They're going to grow. They're going to be in New England, but the politicians win, and we win from a tax base when we lure some of them here. This is the piece that bothers me about the use of incentives. The problem with incentives is it's one thing to use it temporarily
Right.
to catalyze economic development. I will guarantee you the incentives they provide to someone going into Research Triangle Park today are not the same as the incentives they provided when they were just trying to get the park started
Right.
and moving, right? What you need to do is wean yourself off of the incentives, right? Because if you keep piling incentives on top of incentives, then it becomes a subsidy and people become dependent on it, and then they're going to go to the next place because
Right.
you haven't given them a strategic reason to do it, and you're going to lose in the end. So I like smart incentives for what economists call a traded economy, those organizations positioned to export, not just trade within.
Here's where I think we also missed. A lot of the incentives, you know, this is, you know, Gary talks about this and others, some for political motive, but I think it is a realistic. A lot of these things are going for construction projects. And these construction projects are great. In the short term, construction jobs are good jobs. They help fuel the economy. But where our real deficiency is per capita, we're one of the hotbeds of America in producing highly educated college graduates. We're the second worst DMA in the country in retaining our college graduates. 70% of them pack up and leave. Most of the money that's gone out in incentives, few of those dollars are building an infrastructure that are going to keep that smart kid from Brown or PC or URI or RISD here in this marketplace.
Well,
and that's the disconnect.
Again, by being smart about it, I never really liked incentives that were for retail, to sell stuff to Rhode Islanders,
Right.
that were apartments that were going into that, adding more housing stock,
Right.
or hotel rooms.
Right.
I was always for using incentive dollars to create the hardest space economically to do, which is office space
Right.
and commercial space.
Right.
And I didn't mind when we used incentives in a smart way to make sure that we're investing not just in dollars the company took to their bottom line, but in either the people who have a tendency to stay or the real estate. Look at that biomanufacturing facility. It's now going to turn over yet again.
Yeah, right.
Right, and we could go back and look
Beta,
at you can look at the history of it.
Alexion, right.
But here's the positive side of it. If not for the fact that we had a ready-to-use biopharmaceutical facility, I guarantee you they weren't going to come here and break ground and build one from scratch.
But we've only got about $200 or $300 million into the Alpha Beta
Well, the
campus.
question is, how many times do we have to provide incentives for the same site,
Yes.
for the same location? I noticed in a lot of the releases, they weren't talking specifically about the site, but I'm pretty sure that's the site. And if you've been around a long time like you and I have, you know the history of that site. But I can tell you, when I ran economic development, when that site became available, it was one of the best sales tools that we had to attract.
But Alpha Beta was the 38 studios of your era. It was the biggest faux pas.
I was after that, just like I had left before 38 Studios. Well, I inherited the building there. I inherited it.
No, it was.
Believe me, it was a huge incentive.
It was a Joe
right?
Paolino project, and it was. Listen, you know, you got to give some of these folks a break.
Right.
It was an attempt to get Rhode Island in the game in biotech, and Rhode Island had zero tools. to be in that space.
And when I was there, I went to the groundbreaking. You know, politicians like to take credit for the stuff that happens just when they're in office. The truth was that site was there. I was running economic development, and I got to stand and welcome Alexion, and was part of the process to bring Alexion here. Now I stand here looking back at it. Alexion's gone, and now here comes the next. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, on the M4, the M6 in Ireland, we drove by an Alexion.
A lot of pharmaceutical
There was an
companies.
Alexion plant in Ireland.
Yeah, you want to talk about using tax incentives,
Oof.
right? How did Ireland, look at the miracle that happened in Ireland, was driven primarily by favorable tax conditions.
Right. But also, if you think about it, who were the employers they attracted? Apple, Microsoft, pharmaceuticals, real jobs, real wages.
Right. Any place where a company could come and realize lots and lots of income, and for
Right.
a long time they couldn't repatriate it until recently. Now all of a sudden, now they can bring the capital back if they want.
Well, listen, no city has got more cranes going on than Dublin, Ireland
Really?
right now because of London, England leaving the EU and Brexit. That so many financial services companies, major financial services companies, are building offices in Dublin. There has to be 100 to 150 cranes across the city.
I'm excited to see it. I know you just came back. We're going to go. It will be the first time I've flown out of TF Green internationally, and so it's a direct flight right to Dublin.
Listen, I'm going to
looking forward
sound.
to
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I'm the Chamber of Commerce for TF
Yeah,
Green
you are.
and Ireland. It couldn't be easier. It couldn't be less expensive. It's cheaper to fly to Dublin, Ireland, and easier
to Philadelphia.
than to take the train to New York City.
yeah.
And Ireland is not expensive like other parts of Europe are. It's not London. It's not Paris. It's not Switzerland.
Well, to your
where,
point that you started with, the smart use of tax incentives can be catalytic and can help transform an economy. Emphasis on smart. Right, and do you have the checks and balances around how we're using them? Because the 38 studio thing has made it almost impossible, to shape a deal that makes sense today.
Yeah.
Right, because of the bad history around 38 studios, which many of us, while we were watching the movie unfold, said, and certainly now with hindsight, you look at it and say, that was not a smart use of incentives. We had a terrible position in a very risky enterprise. We had the majority position. I mean, nobody would look at a deal like that, and would consider that a smart use of investment.
How do we transform? The governor appointed, didn't last very long, an innovation officer, right? Funded by the Alumni Association or something at Rhode Island College, one of the most bizarre constructs to fund a state position. And I don't know that he produced anything. He's cost a few $100,000, but all that being aside, how do you transform? It's not a one-person job. It's sort of like being, the ethics officer. Well, ethics ought to probably permeate all of government. Innovation should all permeate.
But just like with ethics, you still need somebody to oversee it, put the programming in place, make sure that it works. I think the same thing is true today. It won't be always, but given where we are today, I thought Richard Collado came in. First of all, I thought he was a really good guy.
Yeah.
Very smart, had national, kind of.
He had a real resume, right?
And could attract lots of interest here. They didn't set him up right, as you alluded to.
I would say dragging him in front of the bus and running out of the way was about the strongest analogy I could make.
But the thought was right.
Yeah.
Right. The person they brought in was right. Right. They didn't set it up in the right way, and then they didn't get behind it and rally behind it, and then start to show the wins both in he could have done two things. One, we've had many conversations about innovating in government itself and government agencies, right? And we definitely need better infrastructure to drive an innovation process for that, but also to be a champion for innovation, out in the marketplace to help position Rhode Island as a unique place for innovation. education, which is what we at BIF, and the reason we set up BIF in the first place when we first started, which was to try to tell this story about our strategic weapon here in Rhode Island is our size. If you focus on downstream innovation and changing these models, education, healthcare, shopping experience, we should be the first in that space. You might remember one of my failed initiatives to try to turn Rhode Island to become the first state with border-to-border broadband wireless.
Oh, right.
Which was my big pitch for, this is the 21st century highway. We could be the first, and even today we would still be the first. And in Rhode Island, it's pretty cheap to do.
Why isn't it done?
Because the players who make money by selling
they were not pleased with you.
We're not very happy with me and the government saying maybe we could put border-to-border.
That was actually a really good idea.
Yeah.
Do you have to do it as government? Could somebody just do it? Google's been trying to do it in some cities.
Well,
I know Portland, Oregon.
if you're going to use private investment and try to maximize return on investment, you're going to skim off the top, right, to the folks who can pay a lot of money. You're not going to be concerned about the part of the market, and you're not overly concerned about whether institutions can talk to each other seamlessly. Like whether the ambulance that picks us up at home and brings us to the hospital, has a seamless broadband connection so the treatment can begin right at my home and move to the thing. And the same thing is true in education. But the incentives are not right. So the state had a role to play. There was also trying to get access to the places for the cell towers. So I think there was room for a public-private partnership here. And I still think there is, right? I think we're going in the wrong direction with net neutrality. Like this is the 21st century highway system that can help make us innovative, both locally and nationally again. And we need to get back to that. And I always say to the politicians, a pox on both of their houses. I don't think either party wins the award here.
No, absolutely not.
For doing this.
Last but not least, you're sitting back as a good Rhode Islander, somebody who runs a business here and sees kind of the political discourse that's happening here. Maybe we're not as bad as Washington. Maybe we're a little more functional, but not a lot more functional. We just came out of a legislative session, which it's hard to see anything of any significance getting adopted, on top of a year before in which nothing got adopted. You can say that's good or bad, but there wasn't a lot of big thinking. There's not a big ideas. There's no strategic plan in healthcare. There's no strategic plan in education. We're not seeing any of those things. How does Rhode Island take advantage of the size, take advantage of the innovation opportunity, and not fall into, and I don't think we suffer from the left-right to the same extreme as what is now taking place in Washington. Washington is now 100% hamstrung on almost every issue. We can still, it's not always pretty, but we can still build some coalitions.
Which is kind of ironic because we're hamstrung and one party controls 90%.
Yeah, that's right.
But I would say, and to try to keep this out of the partisan discussion.
Yeah, that's right.
I would say that you show me any government that's 80-20, 90-10 in either way.
Yeah, sure.
Right? It used to be the other way here, and then the bloodless revolution happened and the coup and they took over.
Sure.
Right? But you show me any government that has 80-20, 90, it should be 60-40 at the widest margin. Right? And anything more than that, it's bad governance.
Yeah.
And it's not about the people. Like we keep looking at the people, and saying, these are bad people that end up going to prison. Right? The problem is the system, and the system was designed for better balance. People on committees that are forced to have a real conversation, to shape legislation, to try to shape policy, right? So,
but it's pretty rare.
Our governance model here is not a good one, right? And forget the national issues, just the stuff we do here locally. We see it every year in the General Assembly, and it's not about Mattiello. It's about anybody who sits in that chair. When you control 90% of the game and you control the entire state budget process, right? You get to decide what to do without any process, any conversation. The lobbyists have too much influence over it. It's just poor governance. The problem is, how do you get a state that tends to lean towards Democratic side to understand that it's in our best interest to create better balance there.
Right.
Unless we're going to blow up the two-party system, and I'm sure there's some people who say we should do that, I'm not sure I see that happening anytime soon. So we're stuck. I think that gets in the way of doing what you're talking about.
Brighter note. We are blah, blah, number of days away from BIF. 14th BIF.
Yeah, 14th year.
Greatest BIF ever.
Our annual summit. It'll be the best BIF ever.
It'll be, right. Yeah. What is that? Is it hashtag BIF?
It's BIF
14?
2018.
2018.
We went away from the number. When we got to 13, they said, no,
no,
we're not doing the
right,
number.
Right.
Yeah, so we went to the year. So now it's hashtag BIF 2018. And the one thing I really love is that now you can go to that hashtag and you'll start to see the traffic heat up. I mean, how many events have 2 months before, where the traffic heats up? The other thing that's beautiful about BIF 2018 is there are convenings all over the world that have those same initials for them. So right now there's the Buxton Festival, in Europe, and so we get to mingle our stream with other.
That's awesome.
It's really lovely. It's really great. So I bring you a new storyteller,
please,
to close out here. So we're friendly with Dan Pink.
Sure.
Who's a pretty famous author.
Just came out with a book.
Incredibly well-written, very interesting book. It's about timing. And
I'm reading it now.
It's really quite good. I've got a podcast with him coming out.
Oh, great.
He tells me the story about his daughter, who is a rising senior out at Stanford, who just completed a project where she traveled around the country talking to 21-year-olds, called America at 21. And she talked to several thousand 21-year-olds and collated all of this and created stories and testimonials and then distilled it to, if you really want to understand what 21-year-olds are thinking. And she's going to come to the summit, which I always love having youth, on the stage.
That's great.
Always the most compelling storytellers we have. And she's going to tell us what she learned about 21-year-olds in this country. It should be really great. Really looking forward to it.
Will it be a precursor to the midterm elections? Because the big question is, here's the youth, they're empowered, they're energized, but are they actually going to show up and turn out and vote?
I expect her to talk very candidly about what she learned about how 21-year-olds everywhere in the country, she traveled all around, are thinking about that, because I think it's the big question on her mind. I'm pretty sure the week of the summit, the 13th and 14th, is right after the primary.
Tuesday's the primary.
The primary is that Tuesday.
Yeah.
So it should be an interesting week.
Absolutely.
It should be an interesting week.
As always, Saul Kaplan, thanks so much for coming in. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. A great afternoon. Small businesses at the 3 o'clock hour. The big brains, Gary and Saul, in the 4 o'clock hour. Always a delight for me. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in today. Tomorrow, I think Rachel's got the 3 o'clock hour, and I think Billy Gilman leads it off. Superstar musician Billy Gilman back in the house at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Thank our friends over at Deepwater Winds earlier this afternoon, friends at Commerce RI. Saul, as always, thank you, and we'll see you back tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.